Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Jade-Isis Lefebvre and I'm a counselor at Concordia Counseling and Psychological Services. And today Florence and I are here. You can introduce yourself, Florence, if you
Sure.
want.
My name is Florence-Dyens. I'm a counselor at Concordia University.
And we wanted to talk about with the students, different self-care strategies and also identify different problems that some of our students are feeling. So we just wanted to have a conversation together and hopefully you can listen in and maybe feel a little bit supported or maybe validate some of your own experiences with what we've seen in our work. I recommend that if you want, you can have a journal so that you can take notes and potentially take some time to reflect on some of the things we've talked about and how they apply to you after you've watched us or maybe even during.
So for the last couple of weeks, we've done a little bit of tele psychology sessions over the phone with Concordia students. And I find a lot of themes are coming up in terms of what students face in terms of challenges. So I've noticed that some students actually feel like their anxiety levels have gone down because there's a lot, sometimes some feel there's less pressure and things are slowing down, but then there's also the opposite effect where for some students, the anxiety is ramping up. And some main themes that I'm noticing is a lot of isolation, a lot of feeling of loneliness, of feeling trapped during this time. So I think it's important to talk about that, about different challenges that students can face.
Yeah, of course. And then also adapting your own, first of all, finding your new routine and then adapting your routine to the others in your home if you are sharing your space with other people. And so how do you how do you figure out a way to continue having your own space, to do your own routine, take care of yourself and do the things you need to do to show up and be your best version of yourself, all the while trying to do that in this new full-time experience with maybe some people that you might not want to be with full-time.
Absolutely, and also you're talking about routine, which I think is important because a lot of challenges that you can face is also having difficulty keeping up with a routine or keeping up with just different responsibilities, whether it's trying to finish up schoolwork or being engaged in different activities, whether it's exercise or completing your thesis.
What have you been suggesting to your students based off of the self-care and finding new ways of coping?
I'm really encouraging students to reach out, to connect, to make special dates with friends or family, and you can be really creative. So if you want to eat a meal with a friend, Skype over dinner time and share a meal, or even be creative and say, hey, let's cook this recipe together, but in our own different separate apartments. So there's many ways that you can remain
Mhm.
connected as if you're together, but further apart. So I think that's what I'm encouraging the most. You can also stay in touch old school ways like writing letters or even writing emails, things like that. So there's ways of being creative with staying in touch. So this is what the number one thing I'm recommending to students right now.
But other things too, like doing art together, or what I've been doing with some of my friends is that B-Cycle, which is a studio in Montreal, they've been doing free online bar classes, and actually, Florence, we do them all the time at the same time. I mean, I love doing it with you, knowing that like if there's an exercise that maybe might be helpful for you, and then just like texting you after and saying like, hey, this one might be a good class. Like I feel like that helps us stay connected and from a work perspective, but also our friendship. And I've been doing dance church with some of my friends as well. And that is this online dance class, and it's really fun and like body positive, and it's like it's this great program. So if you're interested in it, you can just Google or go on Instagram and search dance church, or you can go on Google and find it too.
So that's interesting because even with finding a way of doing some exercise without going to the gym or without actually going to studios, you can also do it and stay connected with friends and keep yourself accountable and make special dates to do that. So also something I encourage students to do is to practice breathing, whether it's through yoga, mindfulness, meditation, just practice deep breathing. That's something that's always useful. And sometimes even practicing when we're doing well can be helpful in moments where we're struggling a little bit with our emotions or with anxiety, because then we can use those tools of what we've practiced in terms of breathing during those times. Yeah, so I tend to focus more on box breathing. I find this one is the one that helps the most. I don't necessarily recommend specific seconds to do the box breathing, but how it goes is to inhale through your nose. So to take a really deep inhale through your nose, and then to hold your breath a couple of seconds, and then do a deep exhale through your mouth, and then hold your breath a couple of seconds. And I find if I dictate the amount of seconds, that can sometimes be difficult because we all have different lung capacities. So do whatever is most comfortable for you. But the whole point is to calm down your nervous system while you do this. So, and to be mindful of what's happening, of the breath going in and the holding the breath and breath coming out. Because when we just say, just practice breathing, practice inhaling and exhaling, sometimes it can actually make you feel like you're hyperventilating if you don't have that break in between each inhale and exhale.
I like to keep it simple as well. And as we were talking about it, I was just practicing. It just feels so good to like actually get a full breath in. But one of the things that I've been sort of suggesting to my students, and I've been practicing myself, is 8 breaths in the morning, 8 breaths before lunch, and then eight breaths before bed. So that it's a system that I have that helps me keep connected to more of a mindful space. Sometimes I practice with my hands, because it's really important to have your belly breath and the box breathing. That's one of the things that sometimes people struggle with. So having the hands on your chest allows you to really get a full breath, and you can feel your breath move through your body. But I know that there's really great apps. Like some of my students use Headspace. There's Calm. There's so many that we can use, and I'm sure we can link some on the Zen Den for the students to go see.
I was going to say, with the way you're recommending having specific time to breathe and practice that, sometimes I encourage students to keep a gratitude journal. So to every day identify something that they're grateful for. So sometimes we tend to just focus on things that are not going well, or on negative things. And I think that sometimes helps find a little bit of balance, and also look for positivity during the day. So that's also something that I like to suggest in terms of self-care and coping.
Yeah, and I think like the gratitude journal can be really tied in perfectly with the breath. So say if you have your breathing in the morning and the evening, you can do your breaths, and then that actually primes you really well to be in a much more aware and calm space to be able to practice your gratitude. So it can be a kind of ritual or routine that can be included, in your sleep ritual, or in your waking up ritual or something. And what I find for students, like, that's really helpful is to do it after you do something every day. So say if you brush your teeth every night, which I hope you do, you can do it right before you brush your teeth or right after, and that can be part of the way that you ensure that you get your breaths in or your gratitude journal in. Yeah, one of the things that I have been finding is really helpful for some of my students is, speaking of ritual, is figuring out a ritual or routine that is really relevant to them and to their lifestyle and to their needs. So when we look at some of the sleep research, we see that some people are more or like early morning people, and some people are more night owls. So sometimes also tailoring, because now we have so much time on our hands that we're home, we can actually adapt our schedules a little bit more, with more flexibility to maybe the energy levels that we have in the day. So if you're someone that is really productive in the morning, then potentially you would front load your day, or maybe back loading it if you're more of a night owl. So that's something that's really shifted a lot of my clients and their feelings of maybe low motivation, is figuring out like this is an opportunity to sort of challenge yourself and see when you're at your most efficient, especially for students that are doing their doctorates or their masters that have a lot more time, that are maybe writing without having a structured course. It's helpful for them because they maybe don't have as much time, like specific time frames to do things.
Absolutely. And I also think, the biggest trap is when you don't have any set goals or anything for your week or for your day, it's easy to then just fall into the default of not doing much, not really getting out of bed sometimes, not really having anything planned. And then at the end of the day, it can be really hard when you reflect back on what you've done throughout the day. So finding some kind of routine that works for you, making sure that you get up every morning and that you get dressed, just changing your clothes, taking a shower, doing regular things that you would do if you had to leave the house, trying to go for a walk if you can. These are all little things that I think help with getting a sense of normalcy. So I think this is really helpful to try to build a routine and try to also build some kind of goals that you want to set for yourself. And all that you can do with flexibility. So it doesn't have to be, I have to wake up at 7 on the dot every morning. And, you have to go with your rhythm and what works best for you.
Yeah, for sure. And like what's pretty cool about our time right now is that you can sort of try different things too that might work for you in your routine now, but also try to implement things that are more sustainable once we're able to leave our homes as well. So it's a good time to really set that routine in a way that makes sense for you that can also be done sustainably for a long time. Because I think sometimes what happens too is that we decide, okay, now is going to be the routine. Now I'm going to be really rigid about this. Now I'm going to follow these steps, but then it's not something that can be contained over time. And in fact, I had a student that I was working with, and this person was really, really, they gave a lot of importance to self-care. And I asked them, I was like, okay, what are the things you do for self-care and how are you making sure that you're staying healthy? They were in a very demanding program. And then when we outlined all the things this person did, it was almost like 4 hours of self-care a day. And it was so much, and she put so much pressure on herself to get all of her self-care in every day that it ended up not being self-care anymore.
Mhm.
So it wasn't sustainable and it wasn't healing anymore because it was just one more thing she had to do on her schedule and her routine.
Um, talking about routines, one of the also the important transition is falling asleep and having a healthy sleep hygiene, I think. Do you have any tips for sleeping?
Yeah, so I think I'll be a little bit transparent. For me, sleep hasn't always been one of the things that I like to do the most. I'm more of a type of person that thinks sleep is a little bit boring. So this has been a very important year for me in sleep, and I've done a lot of research and talked to a few experts on how to integrate sleep. And I think the biggest shift that has helped me and that has helped a lot of my clients has been understanding sleep as self-care and as a way to nurture yourself and take care of yourself. So for me, the shift in my mind was, okay, tonight I had a big week. Sometimes I would say I had a big week. I can do a yoga class, or I can watch a TV show or do something to take care of myself. But I started saying like maybe the best way to take care of yourself is to actually just go to bed and have more energy and to feel that it's almost as if you drink more water when you sleep. Like there's a sense of feeling really hydrated. So I've started to like experience the hydration and want it more and like it more. And what's really helped with that is having a routine for a morning routine, like when I wake up, and a routine for when I go to bed. So that my routine is actually something that feels really close to my heart. It feels like I'm recentering with myself, and taking really important time just to reconnect with my being. And a lot of times that can be kind of a way to really feel like your sleep is even more impactful for your whole life and not just for your physical body.
Hmm.
Um, then for sure, having your routine in terms of the time that you wake up and the time that you go to bed is really important. So some people need, half an hour before bed to wind down. Others need even longer. So having a wind down routine to ensure that you are going to bed and that your body knows that this is the time, so that it's getting used to sort of slowing down, and your body, your mind, and your emotions will slow down with you. And the
Hmm.
thing that changed the most for me is using light. So ensuring that if I'm trying to shift my cycle so that I'm waking up more early in the morning, I try to get as much light as possible in the morning and limit my light exposure in the evening, whether that's going outside, you know, later in the afternoon, that's totally fine, like going for a run or whatever before before dinner, but ensuring that the lights in my room aren't as bright, as of maybe 9 p.m. or 10 p.m. before I want to go to bed, and making sure that I front load my light exposure in the morning, so getting up as early as I can to go get some sunlight on my skin.
So I would really add, for me, it's screen time. So making sure that I actually put an alarm on my phone every evening to kind of remind me what time it is and that it's time to wind down, because otherwise you can get in that trap of not realizing what time it is sometimes. Yeah, I use my bedtime app on my iPhone, and I think that's really helpful. But you can use any kind of alarm clock, any kind of signal that tells you, okay, now it's time to wind down the exposure on the phone, internet, anything like that. So I think that's something that helps me. And I like to read a book. I like to kind of disconnect with, just really disconnect. Another thing that I find is helpful is when I create certain boundaries around my bedroom, bed. So my bed is only for sleeping. It's not a place where I do my
Okay.
work or I study. I know sometimes this can be challenging because if you live in an apartment and your bedroom is the place where you have to do your work, it's important then to create certain boundaries. So making sure you put all your stuff away that reminds you of work or that's about leisure, and your bed is really just for sleeping. And I always try not to look at the clock too much when I'm trying to fall asleep, because I find that's an added pressure when I can't fall asleep to then say, okay, now it's this time. And I know I'm going to be tired tomorrow. And the more I think that, the more I get worried about not getting enough sleep. So these are just the little things I try to do. Another one is, depending, everyone's different, but I think avoiding any caffeine or alcohol too late in the evening is a good idea as well. Sometimes even in the afternoon to start cutting it down, because then it really affects your ability to sleep, especially caffeine. So those are little things that I find helpful.
Yeah, like the caffeine, and also when you're really fatigued, it can make you feel like you're feeling anxious, but it's really not necessarily a symptom of anxiety. It's more of a symptom of fatigue or of the caffeine. So that's something that can come kind of affect our system with sleep too, because you're saying, I'm waking up really tired. Am I anxious? And did I sleep well? And so they can add a lot of questions, and it can be really difficult. And then that can make it even more difficult to sleep. So sometimes if you wake up tired, just telling yourself, putting your hand on your heart, just taking a deep breath, like Florence was saying earlier, and sort of checking in. Am I tired? Am I fatigued? Am I stressed? And sort of trying to tease those apart too, and see sort of which one it might be, so that you're not kind of blurring them all together.
And sometimes we worry and we have our thoughts that are kind of running in our head. So one thing I like to recommend when that happens late in the evening is to keep a journal, or just to have a place where you can write these thoughts down, because then we're externalizing that, and we're not, it doesn't necessarily belong to within us in our own head floating around. So I think that's a good way of just letting go of certain thoughts that and to tell yourself, well, you can address those thoughts tomorrow morning. You're going to have more energy. You're going to be a little bit less tired to address these different issues. So that's something I would recommend too.
It's such a good idea too. And one of my students, what was helping her was actually to write down her to-do list before, half an hour before bed, as part of her routine. So she wasn't doing her to-do list in bed, thinking about it after, and just thinking about it out for hours.
Yeah, and I think this kind of leads us to the topic of regulating our own emotions and becoming aware of our emotions, which I think is something that we really need to address right now. Because in order to be able to regulate our emotions, we need to first be able to identify what we're feeling. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to post with this link a wheel of emotion to help you identify what you're feeling. So this is the first step, I think, to first of all notice and observe what physical sensation you're experiencing, and to label the emotion that goes with that.
I think sometimes too, what's hard with that first step of labeling the emotions is we don't have the vocabulary. And so that's where the wheel of emotions become really helpful, because then we can sort of identify the difference between anger and grief, or between, joy and compassion.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it opens up the vocabulary, and I think that's can be helpful in terms of feeling like the emotions are a little bit more specific. And then from there,
Mhm.
I think the next step is to realize what you need when you're feeling this emotion. So I think when we're saying, okay, I'm feeling, let's say I'm feeling really sad right now, I'm feeling really isolated and lonely. Okay, well, I need to take a moment to recognize I'm feeling these emotions, and then instead of just avoiding, right, and then just trying to zone out, and then to say, okay, well, what do I need in this moment? Do I need to actively connect with someone? Do I need to do an activity like an exercise, or do I need to read a book? Do I need to take some deep breaths? So to connect the emotion with your needs, I think is something that's going to be helpful in terms of regulating your emotion.
And I think it's so important too, because a lot of the strategies we talked about for self-care have been really behaviorally or action oriented. And this is a more emotional way to take care of yourself and to soothe yourself and to ensure that you know that you can be on your own team and to take care of yourself in a sense of like of validating your emotions rather than being, you know, avoiding your pain or telling yourself that it's not okay to have pain. Yeah. I think this is my top self-care exercise, and it's really, it goes well with this an emotional perspective and knowing your needs. So I don't know if, I mean, we've talked about this before, but I don't know if some of our learners or our students have heard this before, but the idea of love languages. And so this is a research-based construct that has 5 ways that we show love and receive love. So this can be with a parent, a partner, you know, a pet, or even with yourself. And this totally transformed my own practice of self-care, transformed a lot of the self-care practices for the students and the clients that I'm working with. And so understanding the 5 ways that you can care for yourself and knowing which ones are the best ones for you can optimize your self-care so that it takes maybe a little bit less time, but it feels even more wonderful on you. So the 5 ways are physical touch, acts of service, quality time, giving gifts, and words of affirmation. So words of affirmation is really just it's just using words to take care of yourself. So it might be, I had one of my students, she had a post-it on her mirror every day, and then she could write different things to remind herself of, you know, more positive aspects of herself. It could be also taking the VIA questionnaire online. I think it's the strengths questionnaire online, where you can identify all of the strengths that you have and then get to know yourself better and use that vocabulary to remind yourself of your confidence. Quality time would be really spending time with yourself that makes you feel like you. So whether it's drawing, painting, singing, dancing, exercising, it could look like so many different things. Just it can be really simple. Even like meditation can feel like quality time, or going to bed with a big blanket if you're physical touch. Then physical touch is again, it's the way that you care for yourself from perspective. So if someone who's physical touch will usually like wearing really soft hoodies or really soft blankets. They may enjoy, you know, self massage practices where you can rub the back of your head, even rubbing your hands, things that feel really soft against your skin. And if you're alone, this is a good way too of reconnecting with yourself. Acts of service can look more like a therapy session. I think exercise could fall into acts of service as well, depending on your perspective. It can be cleaning your apartment. It can be, I don't know, cutting. I don't want to say cutting your own hair because all these COVID haircuts aren't looking good, but things like that. And then giving gifts. Giving gifts, if you don't have a lot of money, it doesn't need to be big. It can be really little things like ordering your favorite chocolate bar when you go to an online grocery store, just to thank yourself for the hard work that you've done this week. Yeah, do you have any good ideas that you've heard or that you've seen from some of your students for the self-care love languages?
I would add writing a letter or just a note, a warm fuzzy, something like that for someone that can go a long way into brightening someone's day and just making you feel good about reaching out. So that's something I would add on.
Yeah, for sure. And that goes really well into kind of the last thing that we wanted to talk about really briefly, and it's a mindful self-compassion approach to all of this self-care. So I guess it's just remembering that, and why I say it leads in really well is because one of the exercises for self-compassion and compassion-focused therapy work is asking your compassionate self and your compassionate part of you to write yourself a letter and to validate your emotions and to take care of you from that perspective. So that's a really great actually journaling exercise that our students can practice. But having a compassionate approach to this whole context is really important because it helps us gain perspective on everything that we're going through. So really remembering that it is really difficult. Like, we are in a worldwide pandemic and you are adapting to a completely new environment, and it is totally normal that you need to change your coping strategies and make them a little bit more flexible and rediscover new ways of caring for yourself, because this is never before seen experiences in all of our lives, and it makes sense that we are stressed and that we're unsure. But at the same time, if we up our coping and we decide to treat ourselves in a much more compassionate way, we're much more likely to have a healing outcome of this and build a strong foundation for our futures.
Mm-hmm. And I think I would really encourage everyone to keep a list of different ways in which you like to do self-care, because I find one of the biggest trap is to need self-care and then come up with a blank and saying, okay, well, what am I doing right now? So if anything came up during this discussion, to have it down and to write it down, I think is really helpful, and put it somewhere where you can go back and really try to find some kindness for yourself. Also, some days will be better than others, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. And like, as you said that, it reminded me that some of my students actually have their self-care list on their phone, so they can pull it up whenever they want. And they even tailor their self-care list based off of time. So say if they have a really busy day, what can they do in under 5 minutes? What can they do
Mm-hmm.
under 15 minutes? And what can they do under half an hour, So ensuring, like you said, to have your list ready to go and make sure that it's really appropriate to you and the type of world that you live in and that you want to lead. And like you said, be nice. uh, it was so good to talk to you and see your face. I miss you so much.
It was. All right, I think this kind of sums it up for our discussion today. We really hope this was helpful, and that you can take a couple of tips from here.
Mm-hmm. We wish you the best of luck, and feel free to take a look at all the resources we have on the Zen-Den. And if you have any questions, write them down, and hopefully we'll be able to answer some of them for you soon.
All right, take care.